Okay, think back to when you first learned math. For a lot of us, it was just a blur, right? Abstract numbers, confusing symbols on a chalkboard, and just a whole lot of rote memorization. Teaching abstract mathematical concepts to young, developing minds is an absolutely incredible challenge, especially since children's brains at that age are built for play and stories, not cold, abstract logic. But what if there's a better way? Well, today, we're going to deconstruct an absolute masterclass in early education pedagogy, Chapter 3 of a fascinating foundational math textbook. Throughout this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how this chapter brilliantly solves the challenge of introducing numbers, addition, and subtraction to young kids, basically transforming an intimidating subject into a totally engaging experience.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at story-driven addition and subtraction. Second, tactile and interactive learning. Third, conceptualizing value and empathy. And finally, applying counting skills.
All right, let's dive into Theme 1, Story-Driven Addition and Subtraction.
Right off the bat, let's look at how the creators use a totally relatable narrative to disguise the introduction of serious math. The lesson doesn't begin with a number line. Instead, it starts with a story called The Mango Treat. A squirrel is happily eating a mango, and a bird is watching. Immediately, the child's attention is grabbed by this vibrant, relatable scene in nature. It sets the stage so that math isn't just something that happens on a test paper, it's something that happens in the real world, right in the middle of a delicious mango feast.
And this is where it gets brilliant, illustrating exactly how the chapter builds the concept of addition. They don't just slap a plus sign on the page right away. Instead, the narrative simply states, one bird joins. Now 2 of them are eating the mango. One more bird joins. Now 3 of them are eating the mango. By constantly repeating that phrase, one more bird joins, the text is literally hardwiring the concept of +1 incremental addition directly into the child's brain, all by using the natural rhythm of a story.
And this visual progression just scales up and up. One more joins, then another, until we have an entire flock. The story takes the child all the way up to 9 animals and birds feasting on the single mango. So, without even realizing they're doing math, the student is mapping the entire number sequence from 1 to 9 directly to a growing, slightly chaotic crowd of animals.
But hey, every good story needs a little conflict, right? Just as the crowd peaks at 9 animals, the textbook introduces a sudden, pivotal narrative shift. There's a loud sound, thump. Something startles the animals, disrupting the feast entirely. It's such a clever way to recapture a wandering young mind.
So the absolutely crucial point here is what happens immediately after that doop sound. The text simply states, now 4 of them are eating the mango. The flock has scattered. By dropping the animal count from 9 down to 4 in the blink of an eye, the authors are serving up a really stealthy, intuitive introduction to subtraction. The child visually and emotionally understands that a large group has just become a smaller group, laying the perfect groundwork for mathematical deduction later on.
Moving right along to Theme 2, Tactile and Interactive Learning. All right, the conceptual seeds have been planted. Now the book shifts gears into physical, hands-on learning with a section called Let Us Play, Mime with Fingers. Here the exercises instruct children to literally play a game with a friend. You show a set number of fingers, say 4. Then your friend has to physically show less fingers than 4. Then they have to show more fingers. This takes those abstract digits we just learned and grounds them entirely in physical reality.
By focusing on joyful engagement and asking students to match their fingers with the correct number of dots on the page, the textbook takes things a step further. Discussing and comparing hand gestures with a friend forces the child to literally embody the mathematics. It moves the knowledge off the page and into their own muscles and social interactions, which honestly is an incredibly effective retention technique.
And here's the kicker. It's only after this extensive physical and narrative grounding that the chapter finally introduces the actual mathematical symbols, like the little bubbles floating on the page showing the plus sign, the minus sign, the equal sign. Because the child has already enacted addition with the birds and subtraction with their own fingers, these symbols, they aren't intimidating anymore. They're just a handy shorthand for the physical realities the child has already completely mastered.
Now for Theme 3, Conceptualizing Value and Empathy.
This might just be the most fascinating teaching technique in a whole chapter, blending cold, hard mathematics with deep social and emotional learning. The text sets a brand new scene. It's a drawing day event held for children on Ekta Divas, or National Unity Day, which is the 31st of October. By framing the next set of math problems within a real-world community event, the textbook gives abstract values a very human, social context.
Suddenly, this isn't just about counting random objects. It's about providing resources for a community of children. The students are asked to draw lines, assigning different drawing objects to the children in the scene. Then, they have to analyze the result and tick whether the objects were more than, less than, or equal to the number of children. They are visually mapping resources to actual people, deeply defining the concepts of inequality in a way that directly impacts the characters in the book.
And here is the absolute genius of this entire exercise. The teacher's notes explicitly instruct the educator to pause and discuss with the kids the habit of sharing objects when the children outnumber the items. They use mathematical inequality, like having fewer pencils in students, to teach the very human habit of sharing. And they tie it directly back to the importance of unity on Ek to Divas. It just beautifully proves that learning math and learning empathy don't have to exist in completely separate silos.
Which brings us to our final section, Theme 4, Applying Counting Skills.
Time to put all of this to the test. In this final section, we wrap up the lesson with practical application. The text challenges the student directly with questions like, which two groups together have 8 fruits? Notice the massive cognitive leap required here. The student isn't just counting a single pile anymore. They have to evaluate multiple distinct groups, perform mental visual addition across those groups, and find the specific combination that totals their target number of 8.
So the exercises ask students to actually encircle these specific groups, whether it's fruits or umbrellas. They also have to look at groups of cups and spoons and figure out which group has less. This entirely solidifies their grasp of visual addition and the direct comparison of different values. It really rewards the structural knowledge they've been building throughout the entire chapter.
To wrap it all up, the chapter takes the culmination of the lesson completely offline. It instructs the children to make their own number cards from 1 to 9 using different colored papers, asking them to stick or draw an equal number of objects on each card. This turns a math lesson into a tactile, creative arts and crafts project that the student can actually hold in their hands and keep.
You know, the creators of this curriculum explicitly label their approach joyful mathematics. And honestly, as we've seen throughout this explainer, they've absolutely earned that title. They took intimidating, foundational math and successfully transformed it into a vibrant, interactive narrative that actually speaks the language of a child.
The big takeaway here is just the sheer power of thoughtful, structured pedagogy. So I want to leave you with a somewhat provocative thought. If we can use this seamless blend of storytelling, physical play, and emotional empathy to teach something as rigid as foundational math, how can we apply this exact same masterclass in educational design to teach other incredibly complex topics in our world today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.